Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock. My name is Ruth Micklem, and I am your service leader for today's Soul Matters Sunday service. It's good to see you all here this morning. As members of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock, we come together to create a welcoming and inclusive community of diverse individuals seeking spiritual meaning in our lives. We listen deeply to one another, speak our truths with integrity, and honor ideas and beliefs that differ. We take responsibility for our words and actions, striving always to live with compassion and love for ourselves and others. We are committed to promoting social justice and serving all members of the wider community. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. That was beautiful. With the lighting of this flame, let us grow the radiance of joy. With the lighting of this flame, let us spark the brilliance of hope. With the lighting of this flame, let us shine upon the hearts of all those who suffer, who yearn, and who crave the joyful noise of community, all beings, not one left behind. So Diana, do you have a reading for us? All right.
My reading is from Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home by Tojopa Turner. We spend so much time worrying about how to approach our future that we rarely consider how approachable we might be. We armor ourselves with savvy, strength, and certification so that when our moment arrives, we feel sufficiently prepared. But with our shoulder always to the wheel of life, we can miss the very encounter that we have been preparing for. To be approachable to life, to each other, and to the mystery, we have to cultivate an inner hospitality. Like the host who prepares an extra helping of food, a fire in the hearth, and a seat at the table, even when guests aren't expected, belonging always begins with an invitation. When a person extends an invitation to us, we immediately feel welcomed into their world. In fact, much of the loneliness people feel is the result of not being invited. It seems our culture has lost the skillfulness of hospitality. My grandmother used to tell me how, when she was a young woman living in Poland, it was customary to have one day a week when the community was given a blanket invitation to visit your family home. The host would prepare a generosity of tea and refreshments and open the doors to their friends and acquaintances. For those few hours a week, community would share their lives and weave into belonging with each other. By contrast, in modern times, we have become increasingly distrustful of our neighbors and protective of our privacy. But the price we pay for that independence is a sense of exclusion on all sides. One of the reasons I had to leave the city was because it was too painful to smile and say hello to passersby and be continually ignored or even scowled at. At the time, I took it personally, but I think it's more that folks live in a state of overwhelm, and isolationism is a way of protecting themselves. If we want to create belonging in our lives, we have to relearn how to extend our hospitality to others, both physically and energetically. Whether we are looking to create closeness with others, with nature, or living mystery, an invitational presence is the prerequisite to any form of intimacy. Like the physical flinging open of our doors to guests, we can cultivate a quality of hospitality in our presence which signals to others that they are welcome in our community just as they are. This quality naturally emerges when we put down our own maneuverings long enough to be truly interested in who someone is, what they need, and what they love. Simply put, it is to clear an opening in our hearts for others to take shelter.
So, this Sunday is what we refer to as a Soul Matters Sunday. And for those who don't know what that means, it's where we take a particular topic or broader topic and we engage in some dialogue and conversation. We can think that particular topic in order to improve or expand our awareness as Unitarian Universalists, and to think about how we sort of fit that better into our congregation. All right.
I just have a few words to add.
Okay. Thank you.
So we all know what it feels like to want to be accepted. Sometimes we find ourselves adapting, staying quiet, or hiding part of ourselves so we can fit into a group. At other times, we experience something much deeper, the gift of belonging, where we are welcome as our whole, authentic selves. Brene Brown reminds us that opposites of belonging is fitting in. Fitting in asks us to change ourselves to gain acceptance. Belonging invites us to bring our whole selves without apology. Tokopa Turner offers a similar insight. She observes that our longing for community can be so strong that we're sometimes willing to settle for places where belonging comes with conditions, where acceptance depends on leaving part of ourselves at the door. I don't know if you all have experienced that, but I can remember times that I've experienced that. And probably that's what brought me to UU. As a Unitarian Universalist, we often speak of justice, inclusion, and inherent worth and dignity of every person. But those values begin with something very personal, our own experience of belonging and not belonging. When we remember what it felt like to stand at the edge, it can deepen our compassion for others who are asked by our culture to fit into someone else's definition of what is acceptable. Today, we will reflect on those experiences together. As Bruce said, there are no right or wrong answers. You're invited to share only what feels comfortable and to listen as generously as you speak. Our goal isn't to solve one another's problems or persuade one another of anything. Rather, it is to practice the kind of listening that itself creates belonging. So, as we begin, I would like to invite us to hold one more thought. Belonging isn't created only by grand gestures. More often, it grows through the simple act of noticing. It begins when we see someone standing alone and choose to walk over. It begins when we make room at our table, ask a genuine question, remember a name, or let someone know they simply matter because they are here. The conversations we have today are not only about remembering our own experiences, they are also about considering how each of us helps create a fellowship where no one has to wonder, do I belong here? May our conversation today help us become not only a community that values belonging, but one that actively practices it. So here's the first question. When you think back over your life, what's one moment where you clearly felt you were fitting in rather than belonging? What were you changing or hiding about yourself?
It was not just it was moments. It was most of 36 years while I was married. And it was very subtle. There were conditions. I didn't understand that at the time. But where I am now, it's completely obvious to me. What was I hiding? My exuberance, probably.
I guess the one I think of is my first day of my first class in college, 8 a.m. for engineering calculus. I was the only female in the class, and it was obvious the professor did not want me there. And so what I hid was that I knew the answers to the questions he was asking, but I was letting the guys answer them so I wouldn't be obvious.
Mine would be all of high school. All of high school. I was hiding everything about myself because it just wasn't me.
So I grew up with an ADHD creative brain, and I tried to hide that for the longest time. And when I finally realized what was happening and how funny things were, when I could enjoy my sense of humor about it all, it was a big game changer for me. So I would say, yeah, most of my life too.
I hid my spiritual side from everybody for many years. You all know my story about growing up in with a Catholic mother. I did talk about my theories with her, but she thought I was an atheist most of my life. And when I got married, I was writing a book about my spiritual stuff called The Dream Painter, and I was 5 chapters into it, and it was all this stuff I didn't share with anybody else. And I told my wife at the time, there's something I have to tell you. And I didn't know how to tell her I was writing this book. And when I finally showed her, she goes, "Oh, that's it? I thought you were going to tell me you were gay."
Yeah, mine is a similar experience. I grew up in a Catholic family, went to Catholic school, and that was a blessing. That I did because I got a really good education, and I got a foundation in love your neighbor as yourself. And that was reflected in a lot of my education and a lot of the example that I was given, not all of it, but I hid it from my family, my father especially. And I remember one Sunday, I just said, no, I'm not going to church. And how hard it was for him, and we never really talked about it. But my mother, I guess, asked me, and she was raised a Southern Baptist, and she didn't, well, she didn't proselytize or anything. She was like, but I told her one time when I was 18, she asked me, I said, no, I don't believe in God. And her response was, what are you going to do when you have children? And so I hid it from my extended family. All my aunts and uncles, they were Southern Baptists, and I just didn't talk about it, though. I just figured, you know, it's not worth it. And so now they're really all past and gone. But it's just hard talking to somebody that is so fervently believes that if you don't believe as they do, you're going to hell.
Going to hell, that's quite a handoff. Belonging and justice beyond the hymns. That is what we are doing today, is something Unitarians feel in their heart. This is what we do best. I was born, as you know, I'm a seventh generation Unitarian, and many of them ministers. But my mother was a Quaker, although she served on the Unitarian Social Justice Committee. Belonging has been very difficult for me. I was raised an only child. I was raised by adults. Very little of my youth did I have a place to integrate. And not having a dad at home, I didn't know how to play the tricks of playing baseball. And every year you stand around and you pick at recess, you pick teams. It was awful. Always I could count on being the last one picked. One of the two teams had to have me. That influenced me so deeply that it became the power behind the throne. When Unitarianism, we realize we release on each other. We're not believing or being guided. No, we're being guided, but we're not having to be sustained by some higher power. We are that higher power. And when I recognized that, my life changed. And I had a wonderful education, quite an education, a number of degrees. But there was a point in my life where I finally had belonging. And I can see it as clearly as though it was yesterday. It was when Lou Argo turned to me in the Southern Baptist Church and said, "I do?" with a question in her voice. And I knew then, she had married me. I knew she didn't love me, but I knew I loved her and I knew everything about her. And I knew that somehow I could measure up to her standards. And we have been working together as a team ever since. But that was the moment I felt belonging, and I now feel it 58 years later.
But what's one moment, maybe here, maybe elsewhere, when you felt a genuine sense of belonging? And more importantly, what made that possible?
Me first again, but the first two questions are the ones that I identified with most closely. All right, and this time it is a moment. It's the day I walked in here and Paula greeted me. I didn't come because I was coming to a UU service. I came because the speaker was from Unity, and I was curious about what his talk was. But I walked in the door, and I felt like I was home.
I guess the moment I felt like I belonged was when I first came here. And people have been making me feel that way ever since. So I've had a hard time feeling like I belonged anywhere. And I can't explain for that why that happens, but at least people do try to make me feel like I belong here.
I feel belonging with my wife, Selena, and it's probably the first time I've ever felt that way, where I'm just totally, I mean, I know she loves me so much, and we are so connected, and it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't just, you know, boom. But from the very time we first were, you know, going out, associating with each other, we weren't really dating at first. I just felt that there was something different about how I could just be myself. I still hid things, of course, but more and more, I just feel totally free with her.
Hanukkah, I'm going to talk. I just spent 3 days between June and July with a group of 13 people who I had never met. I didn't know them. And we were coming together, giving up some weekend time to try to figure out how to launch something new that all we know is it's needed. What we had in common was a belief that what's happening in this country, what's happening politically, what's happening with systems around us, there's a better way. And the better way being working collectively, living into the future we want now, and doing that through action. And not what can I do, what one thing can fix this, but what do we do every day, and when we do that, what more do we do, and what more do we do, and how do we inspire other folks to do that? And we came from all different professions and communities, and the speed at which we felt like we knew each other and we were bonded and we were working together and generating excitement together was amazing, and not something I have felt since the early days of the women's movement, gay and lesbian organizing. Just lots of, I think that energy is there at the beginning of many different kinds of movements, and it was incredible. But it was a belonging I don't have in a lot of places. So it was wonderful.
So I'm going to push on you a little bit, since, I have that. I can. And I think I asked you this when we were talking about this last night, but what made that possible? What do you think, and other folks have shared about when you had that sense of belonging, what was it that made that possible?
So one thing that made it possible was we all took a risk together to be there. We didn't know what we were walking in the door to. We didn't know who we were walking in the door to. And there was only a very vague description of what we might be doing together. And it was more of you're being invited because we think you will resonate with this. So it was an invitation. It was a common risk together. But the invitations went to people who were hungry for and ready for that moment. And it was remarkably like a group of people who are ready to just do, and if it doesn't work, we'll do something else, like not afraid of failing. The time was also built in a way where we spent 3 days together, but most of the first day was getting to know each other in a deeper way, and our journeys that had brought us to that space. And we stayed overnight together, and we ate every meal together, and we got to have those kind of conversations that you have.
When we think about people who are often marginalized by race, language, class, gender identity, sexuality, disability, where do we see our wider culture asking them to fit into someone else's idea of acceptable?
Look at the highest voice in the land of one of the most powerful people in the world going out of his way to, you know who I'm talking about, going out of his way to marginalize you and put you back in your hole where you belong. Do I have a faith in the future? Yes, I do. Our society for so long, right now we're outgoing, we're exploding all kinds of different directions, but we're finding out all our limbs out here looking back to where we were. It's time to come together again. It's not exactly imploding, because imploding's not always good, but I am so hopeful. It's not hopeful, I absolutely believe the kind of thing that Unitarian Universalists, once the second most powerful religion in the United States, in New England especially, probably the dominant in New England, our whole culture is going to go on those 7 points.
I want to be hopeful like you. My daughter and her wife were planning a trip, and she says, Mom, we really need to be careful where we're going to go. A lot of countries will not accept, our marriage. And, kind of my brain exploded a little bit. But it's just like, it's sad. I mean, because they're a wonderful couple. They have a baby now together, and that they have to think about that. I mean, they just can't go anywhere, or they can go anywhere, but then there could be consequences. So, and when you have a baby, you want to make it as safe as possible. So, but I want to be hopeful too, because they're wonderful people. So,
I agree with Keith. Diversity is the number one way of becoming unified. And if what's happened is we've been divided into all these small little boxes that were being labeled, and everybody's got their own label. And that's just our skills, that's our set, that's who we are, that's our essence. And our essence is all different. We're all unique, but together we're all the same.
Amen.
And that's what we're coming into right now.
Absolutely agree around that concept that our souls, our being, our humanity is all the same. I think if you are marginalized in any way, and there's so many different ways to be marginalized in this culture. Just by being a woman, by being a lesbian, I can speak to those. I think realities for me. And it's not that somebody else labeled me, but where I would feel a sense of belonging, or where I feel mostly a sense of belonging, is often with other women. It's often with other lesbians or gay people, or people that have had those similar experiences. And I think, when I look at this question, or think about this question and think about that sense of belonging, that in order to in order to help people feel accepted and belonged, we have to name it, and we have to recognize that there is that sense of belonging with people who have similar experiences, or similar oppressions maybe, or similar marginalizations. And when we're able to name that, I think, and recognize how to listen to those needs and hear that, then we're able to reduce that sense of marginalization. And that's just one way. I mean, we're in such limited time, I could go on and on and on, and I won't, but I'll stop there.
yeah,
do we want to do all 5, or you want to skip to the last, just 4? Yeah, so I'm gonna, I think I'll move on to the last one, which I forgot to write down, but I think it's how can we center all people, all of humanity? Is that the, yeah, okay. So like, how do we, when we center certain aspects of things, like whether it's whiteness or heterosexuality or English speaking, when we center those things, it creates exclusivity. So how can we, what are some things we can do to actually center all of humanity, which, Jeff, you guys talked about, we're all the same, but we still exclude. So what are some actions or things we can do to actually center everyone?
Is that we all have 2 things in common. We all have families, and we all work. And if you can talk about one of those 2 things or both of them, you can communicate with pretty much anybody. And they can be as equals, because no matter where you live, no matter what your upbringing, we've all had to deal with those 2 things. So that's what I find everybody has in common.
I always find it helpful when you look at people, when they talk to you, you don't look over their shoulder, you listen to what they are saying, and that is, according to me, the best way to make contact.
My observations have been for probably the last maybe 15 years is that there has been a change. There is a change in that our younger generation, they don't see the distinctions in people the way we do, or the way we grew up seeing them. And I think, and I'm not sure what's caused that, but I see a whole different attitude toward people of different color, different race, different sexuality, coming along in our society through our younger people. And I think that that is going to hopefully spread further as time goes on. Right now we're in somewhat of a bit of a, maybe a little quagmire with the certain element of our society that is teaching their young children that this isn't good. But for the most part, I really believe that the younger generation is coming along and changing the way they perceive people in general. And they see everyone the same.
I agree with Keith. Diversity is the number one way of becoming unified. And if what's happened is we've been divided into all these small little boxes that were being labeled, and everybody's got their own label. And that's just our skills, that's our set, that's who we are, that's our essence. And our essence is all different. We're all unique, but together we're all the same. Amen. And that's what we're coming into right now.
Relax, it's short. I am so glad we did not split into 2 halves. I'm overwhelmed. When you did that, my heart fell. This side of the room versus that side of the room. That's not where the future lies. And I personally, Lou and I have been coming to Deltaville for 35 years. And we're Unitarian Church in Northern Virginia, 600 members, and Unitarian Church in Florida, which is very vibrant. But we never saw this doggone sign till I was looking at a timber map, and it happened to have who owned the land. And it was the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of the Rappahannock, and the sign is right there. I'm so glad it's there. I'm so glad we're all together, and I feel super welcomed after driving by your door for 18, 25 years.
So as we bring our time together to a close, I'd like to leave us with one simple thought. We often think of belonging as something we hope to find, but perhaps belonging is also something we create. Each of us has the ability to widen the circle with a smile, an invitation to sit together, genuine curiosity about one another's story, or simply noticing someone who may be standing alone. Justice doesn't always begin in the halls of government or in public demonstrations. Sometimes it begins over a cup of coffee in Fellowship Hall. Sometimes it begins with the quiet decision to move one chair over and make room for another. May we leave here today with fresh eyes for those who may be wondering if they belong. And may each of us help answer that question, not only with our words, but with our presence. Thank you all for your openness today and for the gifts of your story.